Welcome to Raising the Bar, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on the country's most successful leaders and how they elevate their business and their teams. Please welcome our host, Alison DePauli.
Welcome to the next episode of Raising the Bar with Alison DePauli, where we talk to CEOs who lead executive teams and you learn their skill to leverage into your business. It is my pleasure today to welcome Adam Rosen to the show. Adam, thank you for being here. You are a little bit different than our typical guests, so thank you for joining us.
Alison, it's always a pleasure to speak with you, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. So let's get right to it. You are a little bit younger than most of our guests, but you have more business experience under your belt than most. How early did you get the entrepreneurial bug?
I got the entrepreneurial bug when I was in college. So it was my sophomore year, I should say my junior year of college. I took an entrepreneurship class by happenstance, and that's really when I learned what the word entrepreneur even meant. And I didn't really know what it meant until I actually started my business. But my junior year was when I first found out about it. And it kind of spiraled into everything that happened following up after that.
So, and you ran quite a successful business while you were in college and sold that quite profitably not long after. What was that experience like? Because I don't think most people sell their business at that age, but it has to be exhilarating and terrifying.
It was certainly a roller coaster. When we started the company, it was you didn't really. One of my favorite quotes is, if people knew what it was like to actually start a business, no one would actually do it. If you knew all the stuff that you have to go through, there are so many challenges, so many highs, but frankly, especially on the first company, way more lows and deeper lows than even the highest of highs. So it was certainly a roller coaster. And yes, we were fortunate that we were acquired after 5 years. But I always like to be fully transparent about that. It was not some wildly successful exit, certainly not the exit that my co-founder and myself dreamed of when we started the company, or dreamed of when we were running the company, or investors dreamed of as well. It was more of an exit to make sure that our investors could get as much money back as possible. We can make sure that our students ended up in a good place because it was a college recruiting platform. Our customers could end up in a good place, and the business could continue running past us as well. And we could figure out what we want to do in our next journey. So while yes, it was an exit, which of course that is a success, it was not the success and then not the exit that we hoped it would be.
How do you, I think that how people view stakeholders has shifted over time. And in our conversations, you always talk about all of your stakeholders. How do you balance those needs, and what do those conversations look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. So number one, it depends on who the different stakeholders are. Now, with our tech company, we had investors. So we raised money. We didn't raise a ton of money throughout our time. I think we raised a little bit over $1 million. So it wasn't a lot of money that we raised. We had different employees, some that were full-time in the office, others that were part-time, more virtual employees. We use a lot of contractors. But then there's other stakeholders like your customers. Those are important stakeholders to make sure you're paying attention to. Depending on what type of business you are, we had a lot of users. We had about 100,000 users that were student clubs or student club members that were on our platform as well. So those are different stakeholders. And then of course, your employees or your co-founders, your business partners. So there's various stakeholders that every business has. And I think my number one takeaway from my tech company, and even what I'm doing right now with the different businesses that I lead now, is as long as you're upfront and honest and transparent with your stakeholders, you have nothing to worry about. The trouble that I see a lot of entrepreneurs, especially younger entrepreneurs or first-time founders, get into is they fluff things up and they pretend like something good is happening when in reality, stuff is hitting the fan, if you know what I mean. So I think the more honest we could be with our stakeholders, the more forgiving people would be, and the more people would respect you. So always be honest with your stakeholders. That was probably my biggest learning with it.
I agree with that. I had an old boss who used to complain bitterly because I would always give people the worst of what we did before I gave them the best of what we did. And he's like, do you have to say everything bad? And I'm like, well, then we get a little grace when we screw up, because everybody screws up, right?
That is such a good point. Even in sales, That's one of the best things. And I do some real estate on the side as well. And we've looked into buying some big subdivision where we buy land, we'll chop it up into different subdivisions or into smaller parcels and then sell off that land. And one of the great things you could do in sales and in real estate, I use that technique a lot, is almost go over the top with the cons.
Yep.
This is a con. This is, it's really not good if you don't like this. It's really not good if you don't like this. And then what you'll see is people that normally would say, hey, I really don't like this. Now they start defending that position where they say, actually, I kind of like that it's far away from town. I kind of like that it's a 10-minute drive there.
Yep.
I kind of like that I'm away from all the noise versus in the past, they'd be like, oh, 10 minutes away. Oh, that's way too far. So you actually get a lot more leash, to your point, if you are upfront about the cons.
I agree with that. And so now you also own a sales training company, correct?
Yeah, so we do a little bit of sales training, but the main focus is around cold email outreach. So a big problem that just about any company has is they
Yep.
need more sales appointments. And through my tech startup, we didn't have true product market fit with our tech company. That's why we didn't have that amazing exit we dreamed of. But what we were good at was setting sales appointments up with the biggest customers in the world, Bank of America, Amazon, AT&T, and getting them as customers. And we got all of them through cold email outreach. So we turned that into a business.
And what is your best advice for our listeners and our clients are typically mid-market size companies, so 50 to 1,000 employees. What is your best strategy for getting in front of a Fortune 500 company? Cold outreach, anything else? And what is the best way to accomplish that?
Yeah, so I love cold. I think email, people always say cold email doesn't work. Email in general doesn't work. And you know what? They're right. They're right. If you don't know what you're doing, it's not going to work. But if you do know what you're doing, email is a tool that can reach anybody. MasterCard was a client of ours during my tech company days. Why? We cold emailed Ajay Banga, their CEO, who was gracious enough to spend time with my co-founder on multiple phone calls. And then they turned into a client. And that email we sent was all around, hey, I'm a young founder. Would you be willing to hop on a 15-minute phone call to share advice for me and my company? That's how that meeting got set up. And anyone is accessible through cold email. That's why I'm so adamant about, hey, if you know what you're doing, it can be a great tool. And the most simple advice I can give is, and it doesn't matter what outreach you use, whether it's email, whether you want to pick up the phone and call somebody, whether you want to send a DM on LinkedIn, whether you have a Facebook ad, it doesn't matter. Being simple and being clear and being direct to the point will help you accomplish your goals so fast because people will appreciate your brevity. So the more simple we can be, I don't care what tool you're using, the more effective it'll be for you.
I've found that yes, there is a segment of people that do not look at their own email, but there are a lot of CEOs that actually read their own email. Is that your experience also?
I remember, because we're doing this cold outreach on behalf of our startups, and we take that approach sometimes where, depending on the company, we'll reach out to CEOs, big companies, with that advice type of email. And sometimes the response is, I'll have a team member that says, hey, how do I respond to this? And the reason why is because it's a CEO who's worth like $5 billion sent like a 8-sentence response back. They're like, I'm so sorry, I don't have the time, but here's my advice right here. I'm like, how does this person find the time to write like this beautifully written? It's not always the most elegantly written, but it's to the point.
And it's thoughtful usually, right?
Exactly. Well said. It's thoughtful. So yes, you'd be surprised at how many of the wealthiest, most successful CEOs are actually in their inbox or have gatekeepers that still will pass along emails that they think are worth their time.
Yes. I've seen that quite a lot. I don't do it nearly enough, but I'm always surprised when I do it, what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fascinating response. What you are a digital nomad now. I've spoken to you in Hawaii. You were in another part of the country last week. You're in another part of the country now. You're going to be traveling on again in a few weeks. How is that? What is that experience in leading a team?
Yeah, it forces us to have really good systems. So in the past, again, going back to my tech company days, and I always refer to that like I was a pup. I started that right before I graduated college. I was 22, 23 years old, young guy, didn't know you don't know what you don't know. And again, even as a 30-year-old today, I hope that next year or 5 years from now, I'm calling myself a pup today because, in business, in life, it's like you just don't know what you don't know until you experience it. But one of the things we didn't do a great job of was creating really strong systems. Everything felt like we were kind of playing catch up, where now everything is around. We have to build strong systems, especially if we want to live this life where we're constantly bouncing around the different world and in different time zones, not just so that we can be most effective, but so that our team can be most effective. Because if we don't have those strong systems in place, it's impossible to do the type of stuff that we're doing now.
Do you believe that strong systems drive business valuation?
100,000 million%.
Yes. I agree. And what were the easiest and what were the hardest parts about setting up those systems?
Yeah, and I want to really harp on that real quick before I even answer that. Like, I do a lot of coaching with small business owners, from a few employees to 20, 50, 100 plus employees. And that's always the big thing I stress, because everyone should make their business sellable. Everyone should build to sell, in my opinion. It's what I didn't do a good enough job of in the beginning, again, with my tech company. But it was always great advice I got, never was able to follow. But we should all build to sell instantly, right from the start. Even if you don't want to sell, who cares? You'll have the systems in place to make sure you can scale. But if you have systems, you're a sellable asset. I don't care what type of company you are. If you don't have the systems, maybe you're a sellable asset, but your valuation is going to be maybe at 1x revenue, maybe 2x revenue, maybe less. But if you have systems in place, that's where you can get multipliers into account. So back to your original questions, easiest systems to build, I would say, was probably some of these responses that we have to the response templates for the inbox, just because it was so important, but also mainly because we made the conscious effort in the beginning with our first customers. We're going to eat our own dog food, and we're going to make sure that we're in there manually responding to every single email. So because of that, it made it pretty easy to build out those systems. The most difficult systems is the managing of the team. What are the different ways that we hold them accountable? How much time do we spend with them? What's their role? All of that stuff was always is still a tough system, frankly, because it's not necessarily what I love to do and what we love to do, but it's so damn important.
Yes. I've found that a lot with founders, is that, yes, they love their teams, but they don't necessarily love managing their teams. I think that there's a difference between managing a team and leading a team.
Yes, absolutely. I think leading a team, first of all, I think it's really difficult. If you're a digital company like ours is, everyone is from all over the world. I think it's much less important to be a leader of a team and much more important to be a great manager of a team. Now, why do I say that? Because all of our employees, like, they're not on benefits. They're all hourly type employees. They're from all over the world. They're from places in the world where, they're working out of Africa or Pakistan or the Philippines, or from all over the world, where they need to make sure that they're successful so they can keep the job and make money for themselves and their families.
Yep.
Where I think when you're like in office and you're seeing everybody, like, it's more important to be a hybrid of a leader and a manager. But I think there's definitely a difference between being a leader of a team versus being a manager of a team.
Yeah, I agree. And what is the most important skill you have as an entrepreneur?
I'd say personally, my most important skill, I would say, is desire. Because I think without desire, again, being an entrepreneur is so difficult. It's a path that is a lot more of delayed gratification versus instant gratification. Like, some people think, oh, I'm going to start a company and I'll make millions and millions of dollars instantly from a great exit. And that's almost never the case. It's about really, like, the way it was for me. Like, I started my company coming out of college, and I had to work at a restaurant the first year so that my paychecks and my bank account wouldn't be a straight free for all. Instead, it would just be a slow demise. It takes time as an entrepreneur to learn the skills necessary and to become a valuable enough asset. So I think for me, if I didn't have desire and the perseverance that were needed, the skills that are needed, none of that would have came. And I would have just left, after a year or two of having my company, and would have worked somewhere else and made a hell of a lot more money.
What is the core value of your company?
For us, it's really simple. And it's going to sound like a crazy core value because it's like the opposite of what it probably used to be. But for us, it's always about product market fit. And some people would argue that's not really a value. But the reason why I would say it's a value is because what product market fit really is that means that you are adding value to your customers.
Yep.
And that was a struggle again with my tech startup, because we never got to something that was a real value for our customers. created a lot of friction. So for us, it's always product market fit. And that's top of the mind right now. Every single conversation, product market fit.
I think that allows you to exclude people that don't fit your model, and it allows you to speak more specifically with those you do. And I think that is one of the cores for driving growth, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I think you can't, if you're talking to people that don't believe what you do, you can't really help them.
Exactly. And I like values we used to have was like, trustworthiness and conscientiousness and open-minded and all things like that, which is great. Like those are all good things to have. But at the end of the day, like the way I look at businesses, you have to be providing a value to somebody else. And, if you are just a naturally conscientious person, like that stuff is going to come across with yourself. And then you need to make sure you can build systems to make sure that your team appreciates that and follows that. And if they don't, you have to hold them accountable for it. But like for us, it's always about how do we build a solid foundation? Because from that, you can have so much fun scaling and growing your business. But if you don't have that, you're going to be clogging up a leaky bucket, which is a nightmare.
Yes, I see that. I see that quite a lot. And I see people who stick to their, I think it's a wonderful core value. And I think that values have changed, like the meaning of a core value, like conscientiousness and trustworthiness are now table stakes.
Right.
They're not, oh, we're a bank and you should trust. Yes, we know we should. You should just be that way.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well,
we shouldn't have to
show us that.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
No, but
exactly.
Yeah. And you cannot be the same thing you cannot be everything to everybody. So I think that is a wonderful way. How do you segment that? How do you teach your team that? Or is that just a natural outcome of how you build everything?
Yeah, it's a natural element. But again, for our team, we have a very different team than what we used to have. It's people that are just going to follow the rule book that we set. Like they're not trying to become the general manager of our team and they're not trying to manage 20 different employees. They're just trying to do their job the best that they can so that they can keep getting their paycheck and they can hopefully get more and more hours and keep growing within our company. So that's really my responsibility and my job to make sure that I make things crystal clear so that they can do their job to the best of their ability. And then I need to make sure that I have the systems in place to hold them accountable where if they're not doing a good enough job, then I'm able to find out about that and fix that issue or make changes if they need to be made.
I think that clarity is huge. And I think you are very direct. And I think that is really, really important and that people appreciate that. I think people, if there's a problem, people want to be told, right? Okay, well, you did it wrong. Okay, how do I do it right?
Well, frankly, yeah, some people do. But I've also worked with people, one of the reasons we hire a lot outside the US, and one of the things I found, and I love hiring people within the US. Like I love the US. Like I love to hire within the US. I love all that stuff. But I got to say, I love some of these hires that we have where that's how they want to be spoken to. Is if there's a problem, please tell me what it is. And they'll really ask you, like genuinely, thank you so much for telling me I made a mistake. Thank you for being direct. What do I need to do so that I don't make the same mistake twice? And very, very, very rarely do they make that same mistake twice. But I got to say, there were times I used to work with people who are amazing people, really smart, great, went to the best colleges here. And you'd have to have like a hamburger, whatever they call that hamburger compliment sandwich for everything. And it's like, you did this really well. This I wasn't too happy with, but don't worry, because you did this really well for everything. And it's like, that's the type of stuff. It's exhausting.
Yes. And I imagine unclear.
Unclear, exhausting. And part of it, frankly, was I was not as good at being direct, but I didn't feel like I could be fully direct either because, people's feelings are in play. And was I too mean? Was I too direct? Any of that stuff where when I do something wrong, I want someone to tell me, hey, Adam, you messed up like this so that I cannot make that change again. When people are kind of fluffy or gray, you don't really know, like, did I make a mistake or did I not make a mistake? So I'm just going to keep doing what I was doing anyway.
How long did it take you to learn that skill?
Well, I'm still learning it today, but it was probably like 3 years into my tech start where I was finally fed up and I'm like, you know what? I don't care if people think I'm an asshole anymore. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse.
It's okay. I'm pretty sure everybody's heard that word before.
I think so too. But finally, I was like, I really just don't care. If you think I'm a jerk for being honest, then you know what? I got too much other stuff I got to deal with. I just got to be direct at this point. So part of that with always being young and naive and like really caring about what people think. And I still do it to some extent. I try not to, but my ego still forces me to care more than I probably should, which I try to get rid of every day. But it takes time. And I'm hoping as I get older, that'll start to go away more. But I'm constantly learning a work in progress with that. But it was probably 3 years in to my tech startup out of the 5 years where I was finally like, you know what? Screw it. I don't care anymore. I just got to be more direct.
Where do you see yourself in 3 and 5 years from now?
Well, in terms of where in the world or where as a business?
How about both? Because I'm never sure where you're going to be.
Well, I'm never sure, frankly, where I'm going to be either. I mean, I do have my next like 4 or 5 months mapped out pretty well, I think, but a lot of that is just kind of going with the flow. So in terms of where, I honestly have no idea. I could see myself being based in the US. I could see myself being outside the US. I could see myself doing a hybrid. Part of this traveling that I love is I get to explore new places, new cultures, new people. And if there's a place that really pulls me somewhere, great. So I don't know where I will be in the next 3 to 5 years in terms of as a business. Frankly, I don't know where I'll be as a business either in the next 3 to 5 years. With the way I look at things is different chapters. With my tech company, I feel like the big chapter was, hey, do I have the perseverance and will to prove that I can be a real entrepreneur? Not just read about it, not just talk about it, not just watch the videos about it, but do I have the guts to be an entrepreneur? That's what I feel like that first tech company was, and being okay with failure and not backing away and staying strong with that. Okay. With this, it's can I build the systems in place to have a real strong, sustainable online business that we can build from anywhere in the world, whether we end up selling the business or if we end up just continuing to build the business and turn it into something that's of significant scale. But I don't know where it'll be in the next 3 to 5 years, but I know this next chapter is about, can I build the systems in place to have a strong, sustainable online business, again, that we can operate from anywhere in the world.
That is an exciting place to be. And I think that we will wrap it up there. Thank you so much for joining me today. You are so different from our normal guests, our typical guests, and I think that people will really enjoy this. So thank you for being with us.
No, thank you, Allison. Like I said, always a pleasure to chat with you, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. For those of you that are listening, share this episode. If you did, leave us a review. Those really help spread the word. You'll find us everywhere that you find our podcast: Google, Stitcher, iTunes for podcasts, which has just completely left my head. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode. Raising the Bar is powered by Altiqe Consulting, the country's leading independent expert in healthcare cost containment. Astute employers know there's a better way to offer health insurance, and we help them achieve it.